Hello dear friends, here is Anna, and today I want to talk about Schumann's musical house and life rules. So I guess many of you know Album for the Young, written by Robert Schumann. It was originally composed as a birthday present for his daughter. Very often composers wrote this kind of cycles for their kids or family members, and Schumann was not an exception. So it's an album that consists of 43 relatively easy pieces, and actually my next video will be about this album particularly, so don't miss the next video. And today I want to talk about musical house and life rules by Robert Schumann that go together with this album. I guess these rules can be simply called by piano tips for younger musicians, or well, maybe for musicians of any age actually. And I just want to read them today together with you and to discuss how appropriate are them still these days and what are these rules about. So let's get started. So Schumann is writing. Oral training is the most important thing. Make efforts from the start to recognize keys and notes. The bell, the window pane, the cuckoo, investigate the sounds they make. This is actually very interesting that he starts not from telling us, I don't know, how to play, how to be more musical, how to practice, but he's starting telling us that hearing exercises are actually very important for musicians. And of course I absolutely agree with Schumann, and I find it actually also very pity that many kids do not have such classes in music school in many countries where they can train their hearing and do different hearing exercises. So yes, I think this is definitely very important. The next one, the so-called silent keyboard, has been invented. Try it for a while and you will see that it is of no use. The silent cannot teach you how to speak. So this tip is probably not that appropriate these days anymore, but I think in Schumann's time such silent keyboards, they were very popular, because you can imagine when people, for example, traveled, when musicians traveled, it could last you for days and weeks or maybe even months. And of course musicians wanted to, you know, like to keep practicing on something, so they took those silent keyboards. I think some of these silent keyboards even stayed these days. I think I've seen one in Liszt Museum in Weimar, silent keyboard. It's quite heavy. And yeah, I mean, these days we don't use them anymore. But I can understand what he's talking about, that it's indeed can be quite dangerous to practice this, to practice on these silent keyboards, because you cannot have any control of what you like, of the sound that you produce, right? You can only practice mechanically on them. Try to learn to play easy pieces well and beautifully. It is better than a mediocre performance of a difficult piece. Absolutely agree. That's why I always try to take care that, for example, my own students, they mostly have in their program pieces that are totally appropriate for their level, and maybe, let's say, one, maximum two pieces of a level up, so that it inspires them maybe to practice more. But most of the time I think it's definitely much more important to play well and beautifully, as Schumann says, than to play not that well but very difficult pieces. You should always play on a tuned instrument. Yes, guys, I guess many of you have acoustic instruments at home, so please take care that they're tuned. You must not know your pieces only with your fingers, you must also be able to hum them away from the piano. Teach your imagination so that you can recall not just the melody of a composition, but also the harmony that goes along with it. This one I would like to discuss a little bit more because it's indeed a very good tip that can be actually applied probably for any instrument. Well, maybe it's not that appropriate for beginners, but I guess if you want to go a little bit deeper into your instrument settings, try to also practice without your instrument. For example, when you learn a piece and you want to make sure that you really know the text, also practice without your instrument. Just imagine how the piece is going through, imagine your movements. This is called basically practicing without an instrument, mental practicing you can call it. And I think this is a very good, a very important part of practicing, and I think sometimes it can give you quite interesting ideas of what you can do on the instrument when you're practicing without your instrument. So give it a try. If someone places a composition in front of you for you to play and you have never seen it before, read it through first. Yes, I also actually do myself this exercise sometimes, and I suggest it to my students also sometimes, that when you sight read, before you sight read, try to like to play the piece in your head, maybe like feel in your muscles, but without actually playing. This is a very nice exercise. If you have done your daily musical work and feel tired, then do not force yourself to go on working. It is better to rest than to work without freshness and pleasure. This is also a thing that many adult musicians advise younger musicians, because I have a feeling like when you're younger, I was absolutely the same, and I am still the same sometimes, that you tend to practice, especially when you have like a concert coming up or something important, or also when you're really interested in what you're doing. Sometimes you after some hours you tend to practice without really analyzing what's going on, like without freshness and pleasure, just mechanically, which is not a good thing to do. When you're older, do not play fashionable pieces. Time is precious. You would need 100 lifetimes just to get to know all the good pieces. I don't know, I have a feeling people tend to enjoy what he would call fashionable pieces, because we don't really say like this these days, but I think you should just play what you enjoy. But at the same time, when you grow up playing like really great pieces that your teacher advises you, I think it's just forms your taste, you know, and maybe maybe later you are not tend to play music of not good quality. Fancy passages works fades over time. Technical accomplishment is only of value where it serves a higher purpose. This tip sounds very Russian, like I've heard this since I was a kid, but it's indeed very true, because I think so many musicians try to concentrate on their technical abilities, on showing their virtuosity. For example, I don't know, only playing pieces that are virtuosically interesting, that can impress public by the meaning of the virtuosity, you know, like it can even, maybe it's a bad example, but it can even remind me sometimes like of the circus, you know, like you're going to the concert hall to listen to the music, but you just see the circus, you don't hear music actually. Technique is there to serve a higher purpose, to serve a purpose of beautiful music. Absolutely agree. You must not promote bad compositions. On the contrary, you should expand every effort to help suppress them. Well, it's true. The problem is that sometimes people need some time. People need years, even sometimes maybe hundreds of years, to understand what is actually good music and what is bad music, because I think it's not a secret for all of us that it's difficult to understand the music that is written in our time. Yeah, so it's difficult to say if we should promote or not promote compositions that we think and see as bad compositions, because maybe in some years, in some hundreds of years, people will find interesting qualities in them. Changing anything, leaving anything out, or adding new-fangled embellishments in pieces by good composers must be considered an abomination. It is the greatest outrage you can inflict upon art. So this is also an interesting one, because I think definitely you should not add anything to Schumann's music or leave anything. But I think with the composers, as for example Chopin, he definitely didn't mind that people improvised a little bit. In some Baroque composers, we actually should improvise something, even in classic composers. So not sure about this one, not sure. Waste no opportunity to make music with other musicians in duos, trios and so on. This makes you play fluently and with animation also accompany singers often. This one is, for example, that I always repeat, that you should try your best to find somebody to perform with. So basically the idea of this video was to introduce you this wonderful practicing tips for younger and older musicians, and they're also extremely interesting for me. I haven't read them for years. When I was a kid, I had album of Schumann, and I remember rules were together with this album right in the beginning, and somehow this book was also always on my piano, and I just, you know, like I read it in breaks between my practicing time. And if you have never heard about them, I will link them down below, and there are quite a lot of them, so I think it doesn't really makes a lot of sense if I read all of them through, because then the video will be like for an hour. But yes, I just wanted to introduce them to you, and I hope that you will read them by yourself. And probably, I think if you have a child at home who is playing music, it's also a great gift to give such an album. And for any person really who is interested in music, such a book would be a wonderful present, or you can also do it for yourself. As far as I remember, Henley has now a quite new edition of album together with these rules, so you can check it out in your country. And for now, that's it. As I promised, the next video I will film about the album itself by Schumann, and hope to see you next week. Bye!